when it comes to your personal brand and employee branding, it's not this big behemoth that should be set to the side and kind of the bottom of the list. Because at the end of the day, people do business with people, and it's about building trust.
The Industrial Growth Institute podcast connects you with the big thinkers, makers, and subject matter experts across all aspects of an integrated B2B industrial revenue growth function. From strategy, board oversight, and transactions, through all the phases of manufacturing marketing, the complexities of industrial sales, and the nuances of marketing and sales technology and customer experience, I speak with guests who bring insights, innovative perspectives, best practices, and twists on traditional approaches. Each episode explores high-level thinking and in-the-weeds actionable tactics. If you enjoyed these discussions, then please help me out by liking and sharing the podcast, and especially by leaving a comment and giving a review. So with no further ado, let's jump into this episode. I'm Ed Marsh, host of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. My guest today is Alyssa Gelbard, who is the founder and CEO of Point Road Group, an employee and executive branding firm that helps companies grow by leveraging their most powerful asset, their people, using strategic personal branding. Alyssa advises CEOs, leadership teams, board directors on brand strategy and messaging and employee branding and human capital. And she talks about how she helps align all these elements with business strategy so that it actually fits together into an integrated approach that drives credibility and trust. And ultimately, the goal is certainly revenue growth. Alyssa is active in the board director community. She's a strong advocate for getting more women into the C-suite and boardroom. Her perspective includes not only having built a woman-led company, but also a background in strategic marketing, branding, and communication. She's held leadership roles in the biomedical research, technology, and sports and entertainment industries, including in organizations like Rockefeller University, Quidnunc, and the NHL. Alyssa serves on the advisory boards of Patera Kitchen, the Graduate Sports Leadership Program at Endicott College, and the board of directors of Financial Executives International. She's co-president of the PDA, the Private Directors Association, New York Metro chapter, and an elected member of the Tufts University Alumni Council, serving on the finance committee. She's also co-chair of the Tufts Women's Network in New York. And as you listen to this, I'm amazed she has time to chat with me today. She's got an MBA in marketing from NYU Stern's School of Business and a BA in sociology from Tufts University, in addition to a certificate in private company governance from the PDA. So, wow. I mean, that's a mouthful.
Yours is probably the same too.
So don't forget, everyone listening, as we get ready to chat, please be sure to share and like and comment and subscribe on this episode. I know Alyssa is going to bring a lot of really powerful insight. So with that, welcome, Alyssa. Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Before we jump into business, though, you're bouncing back. You've had a couple months recuperating from, you got hit by a bike. I worry riding a bike about getting hit by a car, but you're a pedestrian, you get hit by a bike. How are you now? Are you recovered?
I'm getting there. Thank you. It's been a couple months, slowly but surely. Haven't resumed activity, just started PT. But for everyone out there in parks or on the road, just be careful of bikes. Just look both ways and then look one more time because you never know.
I guess that's an example of life in the city. I mean, you're primarily based in New York City, but I know you spend lots of time commuting back and forth to Boston and also in upstate New York, right?
Yeah. Actually, Western Massachusetts. I'm actually there right now.
Oh, got it.
Doing some more recovery. But yes, I was hit by a bike in Central Park.
Wow.
So yeah, just everyone be careful. But it's interesting because it kind of, I had to press pause basically because I couldn't do anything I'm just starting to get back on my feet, but for months I couldn't do anything, go anywhere. Just sat on my, couch with my leg up and my computer on my lap. But thankfully, because in the world that we live in today, I could still function and work. But it was an interesting way to, really have to hit pause, take stock and kind of reprioritize.
I know you maintain a frenetic pace. I see you all the time at events and on LinkedIn. Was it hard to make that pause?
Maybe
Obviously,
not.
you were forced to, but did you feel jittery about doing so?
Well, it wasn't jittery, but, it happened right at the very end of May. So June was a really busy time with kind of the last bunch of events before summer.
Right.
And I just had to basically say, that's it. Can't do anything, can't go anywhere, get over it. And so, so I'm very much looking forward to the fall. Summer's my favorite time of year, so I don't want to fast forward through summer, but I'm looking forward to kind of seeing people again in the fall because now, everything's pretty quiet.
Right. All right, let's start with the elephant in the room. So many people are skeptical. Senior executives are skeptical of LinkedIn and the idea of personal branding, whether it's, personal branding even writ large, whether it's speaking at industry trade events or actively engaging online. So help us understand, number one, what is executive presence? How do you define that? What is personal branding? And then we'll kind of take the conversation from there.
Okay, so there's lots of things. So I think one thing to start when you said people are afraid of their branding or executive branding, personal branding, they already have it. So that's the thing. It's not like when you decide one day, oh, I'm going to start as an executive, I need a brand. You have one. And that's really the key thing. You have one and you don't realize how much influence it has on your everyday business life. And, when you think about branding, executive branding, personal branding, when we say executive branding, so it's your personal brand as an executive.
Right.
And we sort of track those two words together. So your executive brand is, it's how you come across to others. It's your reputation. It's what people think about you. It's, I don't know if it's cool. I don't know if it's acceptable anymore to quote Jeff Bezos, but he said a great quote years ago. And he said, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that really is your brand. And your brand, it's really important too, that your brand is not just something online. It's who you are when you are sitting in a meeting with your team. It's who you are when you are meeting a prospect or a customer. When you're on the phone, can you believe, people still do that, right? When you're on the phone, when you're on a video meeting, having a video conversation, whether you're networking, it's also your LinkedIn profile and your bio and your headshot and your executive presence, which, that's a whole nother thing to unpack, but it's all of those things and more. So it's, it's also even how you, how you dress, your style, it's how you communicate with others. I could go on and on, but just to give you a sense of, it really encompasses a lot of those things. So those are things as an executive that you have already. So when you look at your brand, it's saying, who am I to others? How am I coming across? And really importantly, am I coming across in the way that I really want to be and that the way I want others to perceive me? And when you are leading a company, that's even more so, or when you're in a highly visible role in a company, then, and when I mean visible, I mean, I shouldn't say highly visible, but when you're client facing or prospect facing or vendor facing or even potential talent facing, your brand really matters.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. We're going to come back and talk about LinkedIn specifically, I think, a lot through this conversation. But first, let's kind of back up. I read a lot of your bio points and your educational background, your career background, but this is a particular niche that you found yourself in. How did you end up in this space? Help us understand the history of that.
Completely accidentally,
Okay.
to be honest. So my career was always in marketing and branding. And I always had an interest in brand and all aspects of a brand, not just and when I say brand, corporate brand, so not just the logo and a visual identity, but kind of everything that goes into that. And so throughout my career, I was always hiring people, and people would always say to me, oh, you're always hiring people, you're in marketing, could you give me advice on career as I'm looking, to take my next step, on business development, as I'm getting out there in communication, as I'm hiring people. It was never an official part of my job. It was just sort of something that I did because it came naturally and I really enjoyed helping people. And it was sort of just, to me, it was obvious, right? And so I started doing that. And then any friends would come to me, colleagues. And then one day, somebody who I didn't know, who was referred by somebody else, came to ask me for help. And at that point, I said, why don't I just hang up a shingle? I'm not going to give away my advice for free at this point. And so then business started to grow really quickly because the approach was, when I first started the company, it was exclusively focused on executive branding. Okay. So helping individual with their brand.
So that was 10 years ago when you founded Point Road Group?
Yeah. But the approach was taking marketing and branding principles. Like I call it branding 101. You think about who you're trying to reach, what's the message that's going to resonate with them, and make sure you communicated it concisely and then consistently. And then if you do that as an individual, when you are looking to get from A to B, and whether that's internally in your business or, externally, that's going to be helpful. So it was a very practical approach, and it worked. And so business started to grow. And then we started to expand our work to also include board directors and help with board director branding. And then out of that grew our corporate business, because individual executives would say, this was really helpful to me. Could you come help my team? And so hence employee branding, which is looking at your entire team and looking at how they come across to others in all those, maybe not in as much detail necessarily as I mentioned earlier, every little thing, but really to educate people on what employee branding is, and for individual employees too, what goes into what people think about them, and then zeroing in on some key things that can really help companies move the needle with employee branding. And then we also added a layer where we found that the companies that we were working with, their company messaging needed, and some of the company branding needed a little help. Meaning, if you are an executive or an employee of a company and you're now focusing on your brand and you're getting out there to be more visible, well, that means you're going to make your company more visible. And so if you're not communicating the best company message, right, then that doesn't look good for the company. So we help companies update their brand messaging and develop a comprehensive LinkedIn strategy, and then really zero in on employee branding.
And how far down into the organization do you think this ought to go? You're working at the CEO level originally, then the C-suite, and then I assume kind of senior executive management. Do you believe the companies ought to be pushing this all the way down through the manager level or director level?
All the way.
Okay.
I always say intern to the CEO and everybody in between. Because think about it, even if you're a couple of years out, right, and you are you're working with, whatever your business is. Let's say you're working on an account for your company and you're working with a client and they don't know you, or maybe there's a new person on the team and they look at your LinkedIn profile and you haven't touched it since you were in college. That doesn't reflect well on the company. Same thing, and one of the things we spend a lot of time on is how you introduce yourself. So let's say you're tenured, that you're a director level, manager or director level, how you introduce yourself and talk about the company in a informal or formal setting, that also impacts things.
Right.
So I think it should be at every level. I mean, no brainer. I know we're going to talk about it later, but LinkedIn is an easy place to start. Communication habits is also a really easy place to start. Response time, language that you use in emails, presentation skills. Those are all things that really are simple and practical and can really make the difference in building a relationship and building trust and things like that.
And that trust is huge.
Oh, it's huge.
So you started the firm 10 years ago. You've grown quickly. Has there been any time along the way when you worried you might have made a mistake having done so?
Oh, all the time. Absolutely. You'll ask any entrepreneur that that question, especially when, maybe revenue is not growing in the way that it was just growing, or you look at your pipeline and you say, it's not it's not filled the way it just was.
Right.
And then you get, all the time. And truth be told, so I glossed over a little piece of it when I started the business, when I said, I'm going to hang up a shingle. When I decided to do it full time, every entrepreneur makes mistakes. My business plan was having 6 months of expenses saved up. So in case it failed, I could kind of pay my rent and things like that. But I did not have a strategic approach. I didn't think about it as a business because business was coming in and we had clients, and then I had to hire somebody to help me, and et cetera, et cetera. So things were going. And I don't know if you've heard, I'm sure you've heard the phrase working in the business versus on the business. And for the first 5 years, I was working in the business, not on.
Right.
And honestly, it was right around the pandemic time is when really everybody took a step back for everything. And I said, we've got to do this better. And that's when I think that's when things change.
But that's probably a great analog for some of what we're going to talk about, where I think some executives understand they probably should be more active on LinkedIn, but they view it in this tactical execution way rather than understanding the big picture about what they're trying to do. So I think we'll probably come back to that theme later on. First, though, I want to talk about some proprietary research that I know that your firm has done into the impact of LinkedIn profiles on a variety of business functions, including obviously marketing impact, but also sales and even recruiting. Tell me about that
Yeah.
research. What brought it about? How long did it take? What was the methodology? And what are the key takeaways?
So it was really interesting. So it came up as a result of internal conversations we were having. So we always, we knew LinkedIn was important, right? We knew that a couple things. We knew that an individual, we knew that people made assumptions and came to conclusions about an individual based on their profile. And then we said, we were pretty sure that they did the same thing about that person's company, but we couldn't find any research to prove that. So we looked extensively and couldn't find anything. So we said, so at the time, we had somebody on our team who had serious research experience. She was a PhD in social psychology and really knew her stuff. Terrific. And she said, well, why don't we just do it ourselves? And we didn't do it with the intention or the thought of publishing externally. It was for ourselves to see if our guts were right. So we did an initial phase where we said, let's just associate it with one person and see what, if people actually associate it with, how their profile is with how that person is as a professional. And then once the results came back and it confirmed everything that we thought, then we said, okay, let's now take it to the next level. And then we did it based on a whole number of things about someone's interest in doing. So based on one person's one executive's profile, and we used a CFO as an example, and we had 3 different versions of that person's profile. So kind of the 3 things that you typically see most on LinkedIn, which is that bare bones says almost nothing about the person. Then that kind of self-promotionally, more of a braggart type where it's all about them and not about their company. And then a third version, which is sort of kind of a hybrid where it does talk about them, but how they impacted the companies that they worked for. So that positive influence they had, as well as things about them individually. And so we used those 3 in the research and then asked lots and lots of questions about the individual and then about someone's willingness to take a meeting with a person who had that kind of profile, with their willingness to do business with, to actually hire or to work for that company, to recommend that company. Not just that, it wasn't just about that person, it was about their company. And we asked them to describe all kinds of words to describe the type of company that they would think that person would work for. So is it one where there's a lot of room for advancement, where there's promotions, where there's variety in work, where there's a positive, happy culture, where there's high employee retention, et cetera, et cetera. So all those kinds of questions. And the results really confirmed what we thought, that there was a direct correlation between what someone thought about that person individually with their profile and the company and all of those things, and a lot of it even pointed back to trust. Would you trust? That was to us one of the most, you mentioned trust before, would someone be more likely to trust a company? I think it's 88% of people said they were more likely to trust the company and their marketing messaging from a company when they have an executive, when they had an employee, but in this case, an executive who had a profile that was, more detailed, sort of that last one I mentioned, the one that was most professional, as we said.
But if I read it correctly, and I'm not an analyst, you've got a white paper that does a nice job breaking it down. But one of the things that jumped out at me is that the alternative is not neutral versus positive. The alternative is actually a negative impression. So if you don't do it, it's not like you're at 0. But if you did do it, you'd get to 100. If you don't do it, you're at a negative number. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the thing is, in some instances, not in every single case, right, but, because, you're representing the company. And if you don't pay attention to what you're doing, like, right, if you have bare bones, what does that say? This is I like to, executives model behavior. Mm-hmm. So if someone, think about it, not just one person, think about a leadership team. They don't care about their LinkedIn profile. This is where people look. It's not that I've been on LinkedIn since 2006, so a long time. And I'm sure you remember back in the day, it was for a job search. Right. And then it was, there were some people who used it. And then, long gone are those days. And this is where, before any kind of meeting, like we mentioned, people look you up there. Right. So if you are an executive team especially, I mean, everybody else too, but especially if you're an executive team, it's your responsibility to represent yourself well
Right.
in the company. And, and shame on the company and shame on marketing, right? If they don't think about that and say, oh, well, we'll get to that. And it's not about, I think the other thing to note too, where maybe some executives may get a little, concerned is it's not about company. And certainly in our case, we're not saying you must do this, you must do that. It's, hey, it benefits you and it benefits the company because you're more credible. You then become more visible too, but you're more credible and people trust you as an individual. So think about, let's say you're happy in what you do in whatever functional area you're involved in. Wouldn't it be nice to be thought about as an expert? And maybe if there's a speaking opportunity or a media opportunity, or maybe a board or a job opportunity, that's going to happen based on an improved LinkedIn profile. Right. And then forget about all the other positive benefits for the company. So it really behooves you.
So what surprised you the most as you got the results back and dug into them?
What surprised me the most? Really that a single person, a single leader could have an impact on someone deciding to do business with a company. I thought that, but you could think, oh, well, maybe it's this one person. I'll move on and try somebody else. That people really thought, and the people that were in our study, it was over 200 people. I forget the exact number. I think it was 209 or 213. Sorry, I probably should know that number. They were all, college educated, were familiar with LinkedIn. So we made sure that this wasn't just kind of random people, but people were actively, and they were, I think they were 10 years out also. So they weren't just, recent college graduates that people experienced in business. So I was a little surprised at that. But at the end of the day, I really wasn't that surprised because this is what our gut had been telling us for a long time, which is why as a company, we've worked with individuals and companies on LinkedIn for so many years.
So I wonder, it almost feels like reviews have gotten so gamified that now people are trying to figure out how to dig a level deeper. And so they're looking to see, do the executives of the company walk the talk? Is it likely a reflection of the culture? Can I trust that company? Which they're deciding based on this gut feeling about whether they can trust the person. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even take it also a step further to the company, which is something that we look at is the company's LinkedIn company, their about page.
Right.
Same thing. That is something companies ignore so much. They might, they created it at one point, maybe updated it. But to your point about culture, you can get a sense. If they're, I can tell you countless clients that we've had that are large clients, and they have like a paragraph or two that doesn't talk about their business today, mentions nothing about their culture. Right. If they're growing, because we focus on growing companies, that means they're hiring. And if you say nothing about your culture, so think about it. If you're a job seeker and you're interested in a job at, I don't know, whatever, ABC company, and you look up the executive team, you don't really get a good sense of any of them. You look up the about page and it's kind of, has some basic information. You don't get a sense of culture. Then you say, okay, well, I'm going to go look at the team. Maybe it's, maybe you're in, I don't know, legal or operations, and you start going to look at who the people are. And they really, can't get a sense. Well, it's a competitive world out there. I might be interested in this company, but there's also their competitor. It's really, they have a much better presence. And maybe it's not amazing, but it's much better. And maybe I'll lean to them first.
Even if their Glassdoor is great, if the LinkedIn is poor, that probably is a largely offsetting factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you could even go deeper and then start looking at how the company posts.
Right.
And what do they post about? Right. If it's all about them, that's also a sign.
Yep.
Just like an individual who posts all about them.
Sure. How has your own LinkedIn activity changed as a result?
It actually hasn't. No. Because I think it's important, for I certainly maintain, I have to be active there. I can't say cobbler's children have no shoes. Right. Although, when you look at a week, like last week was a really busy week, and I think I didn't do that much. And then I think, oh, well, I have to make sure I do that. Same with our team. And then from a posting perspective, we also are really pay attention to what we post because we want to be, we want people to be interested in us, but more importantly, we want companies, individuals, people to look at us as a trusted resource and a trusted source for our areas of expertise.
Where else are you active online? Are there platforms beyond LinkedIn?
I personally am not. And it's interesting. A lot of our clients aren't either. I mean, yes, on the personal side, honestly, I have an Instagram account. I don't actively post. It's just not my thing. But I think when you think about yourself in a professional setting, right? The other platforms, whether it's X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, does it make
YouTube.
sense?
A lot of people don't think of
YouTube,
YouTube as social media. I think it's critical.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. If you're there, does it make sense? I think YouTube a little bit less because there's a little bit, it's not as easy to share things. And I don't mean easy like ease of just kind of pressing a button. But you can share anything, right, on Instagram,
Right.
Facebook, even Twitter. X. Got to pay attention to the brand, right? Do you need to be there? Are you there personally or professionally? If you're there professionally and you post or engage once every 4 to 5 months, do you really need to be there? Who's telling you should be there? We used to, as a company, we used to be on, well, I could say we were on Twitter because it wasn't X yet. And then we realized, do we really need to be here? We think about our customers, right? Are they here? They're not here professionally. So they're not going. So we're going to spend all this time with with social media here for this particular channel. And we know that our customers are not looking professionally here. They're not interested. They're interested here being here personally. So in general, I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but I think if you are in an industry, there's a lot of industries. Let's say you're in the food industry or consumer products, where that visual piece is so important, then perhaps it really is important for you to be there. But making sure that you have a good strategy there and that you're active and that you're not. And then, there's that delicate balance of personal and professional. Why are you there? And what are you sharing and posting and engaging?
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, where is the line between personal and professional? It's largely blurred these days, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So is it based on topics or time of day or what?
Well, I think, first it's looking at the platform.
Okay.
LinkedIn is a professional platform. And you certainly, we all see people posting personal things on it. And for me, I either you can teach LinkedIn not to show you posts like that. And I do that all the time. I don't really I absolutely adore dogs. I'm dog obsessed. I don't want to see someone's dog on LinkedIn. Instagram, fine, but not LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is one of the few places that is purely professional. Now, can you share things in your personal life that blur over to professional? Sure, but you got to be careful how you do it. And
tell me about that.
I'm probably a little bit more to the extreme where I've seen posts from people in hospital beds and things like that, or they're proud of their child for graduating kindergarten, and then you're really just trying to get someone to engage with your post and using that. I know people will think differently, but I don't think that's the place for it personally. But maybe you went through something personal and you got a great business lesson out of it or something like that. But where it makes sense, where it's not reaching or clickbait, really, because a lot of those personal pictures, I think, my personal opinion, are clickbait.
Right.
Everybody's looking because in not just at LinkedIn, but in every social media platform, so much competition. Like you said, it's gamified, but also that those algorithms are changing all the time.
Right.
And it's how can you keep up? So there's a part of me that doesn't blame people for doing that. But at the same time, you also think about your brand, right? Tying it back to your brand. That's who you are. I am happy to share personal stories. I am pretty open as a person, but I don't share personal stuff on LinkedIn unless it has some very close tie to business. And now I'm consistent with your brand. And when you think about your brand, it's also, I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important to reiterate. It's about consistency. That's what creates, that's how brands get recognizable and are trustworthy. Even when you think about the visual piece of consistency, pick any consumer brand, you see that consistent logo or the tagline or whatever colors that they use. that's consistency, and that makes you remember. So as an individual, you want to be consistent in how, that either the areas that you focus on or how you do it, because if you are inconsistent, that creates questions in someone's mind. And that is the opposite of building trust,
Right.
which is what
and the opposite of building brand.
Yeah.
But a lot of people say that to be an effective leader, there has to be vulnerability and authenticity, and you have to be willing to open up a little bit personally in order to share that, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not so much sharing something personal, it's doing it in kind of a contrived way in order to try to get clicks. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It can be. Yeah. I mean, I think for many it is. I would say not for everybody.
Right.
I don't want to be, but I think for a lot of people it is.
There's also, you kind of touched on this, a lot of opinions about, particularly on LinkedIn, the kinds of posts, the frequency, whether you have offsite links, whether you use images or video. Is there a formula?
It keeps on changing. It's so frustrating. There used to be penalized. I mean, it's changed so many times about if you use an external link. And then there was put it in the comments. Then it was like, no, don't put it in the comments, put it back in. And then it was, well, the amount that you get penalized is reduced significantly. So it's constantly changing. One of the things I always suggest to people is follow as many experts as you can and read what they're doing. But so much of it is teaching your feed. So what a lot of people don't realize is if you're always clicking on things from either a certain topic or from a certain person, you're going to see more. It's automatic. So you have to actually teach your feed. If you don't want to constantly see the same posts from the same people all the time or the same topics, you have to do something about it. It also ties, though, to what's in your profile. There is a connection. So if you do not, if there are areas that you're interested in, very much interested in, and you have expertise in, and you don't talk about that in your profile in any way, that if you look at the keyword, it's not there, that also has an impact.
I see.
As well as a million other things.
Right. Yeah, and I think by design, it's somewhat opaque and nobody really knows the answer. There's a lot of guesses and opinions.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people I follow and I read their research all the time, but that's one person or one company's research. But I think you have to stay current. But I think at the end of the day, if you stay true to, hey, here are the areas of kind of my brand that I'm interested in. These are the topics that I either want to write a post about, comment on, share. That's the easiest way to start. Then kind of the technicalities, they'll impact visibility.
Right.
But I think if you're consistent with that, I mean, part of it is finding the time too when it comes to social media.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Think about any executive. You're busy.
Right.
I'm totally honest. I calendar LinkedIn time for myself. Now, sometimes I do it organically too, but I have to make sure that it's there because otherwise I'm doing a million things.
Right.
I may forget, I didn't actually post this week. I just commented or liked.
Right.
And those are good, but you can't only do that.
Right. Who are some leaders that you think are really killing it on LinkedIn? And what would you say is particularly unique or effective about their approach?
It's a very good question. No individuals come to mind right off the top of my head.
Nobody that your team has coached?
Hey, that's a hard one. That's a really hard one because, we look at the people, we look at the company, but for me, what I might, there's also what's going to resonate with me personally.
Sure.
What I admire the most is people who are consistent and who have something to say. Even if it's just a 2-line comment, but where they're contributing something. What I think I more see the opposite. I see these are the things that I don't like that I see. The congrats when, that's their way of engaging.
Right.
I think when it's somebody who shares interesting things, thoughtful things, actually, one person does come to mind, and I think she's so smart. And she hosts podcasts. I've been a guest on her show, but I love her post. Gabriella Mirabelli. She has the Up Next podcast.
Okay.
She posts thoughtful things. She probes issues, and she sometimes pushes the envelope in what she says, but she always has something to back it up. And she's really smart. She's been a business owner. So she's somebody who I look forward to reading her posts, and she engages as well. So she's a good one.
Got it. I know we're talking about LinkedIn, obviously kind of this virtual social media world, but you're also a ferocious in-person networker, I guess the last couple of months notwithstanding. Typically,
Oh.
how many nights a week are you at events?
Oh, not that many.
No?
I'm very no. I'm really focused on if I'm going to go somewhere, there's got to be a reason. I either want to learn something, there's people that I want to meet, I want to learn, I want exposure to something to see if it's something that I might be interested in, but there has to be a reason. I'm not out there all the time. Between as as you mentioned, in the introduction, I'm involved with a couple of professional associations. So the Private Directors Association and Financial Executives International. So I'm at, whenever they have events, I'm there. I'm on, I'm on the board and I'm co-president of the one. So I have to be there.
Right.
So so that's part of it, right? So then that doesn't leave that much room for other things.
And I guess that's maybe where my impression comes from, because I'm a member of the PDA, and so I see you frequently at those events.
Yeah, because I do attend if I'm traveling, and if it's an organization that I really like and I really like the people. PDA is an example.
Right.
If I'm in another city and there is an event and and it works out, great. But I mean, for me, I want to meet other business owners and learn from other business owners and talk to business owners. That's a very important group, as well as women executives.
Mm-hmm.
That's another important. We're an all-female team, and so it's something that I'm passionate about. Obviously, we don't exclusively work with women; we work with everybody. But that's also if there's a women in business type of, or women on boards related thing, that's important too. But really, I think for me, it's meeting other business owners or people who work with business owners, right? Because if you are involved I am involved in bringing in business for the company.
Right.
So I want to make sure I'm meeting people and understand. And really, it's not about selling, right? It's about learning their pain points. What problems are people facing today? So we can learn more about that. And if it's somebody we can help, great. But it's learning about, as a business owner myself, and as well as, because we work with so many businesses, understanding what's facing them today, because some of the things today may be the same as last year and the year before, but there also may be 5 other new things. Right. And because we work across industries, that it's really important for me. And maybe that's also has to do with that visibility. We always, we're a team of constant learners. So we always want to know what's happening, especially in the industries that we work more frequently with, or functional areas that we serve, like FEI is an example, that it's really important that we know what's happening today and what they're thinking about as issues for tomorrow.
So FEI, Financial Executives International. So I assume you mean working a lot with CFOs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. CFOs, fractional CFO firms. We do a lot, as a business, we're a professional services firm. So we do a lot in the service industry, but we don't work exclusively with service industries, because at the end of the day, any company is service because you have people. So if you're a manufacturing firm, if you're industrial, it doesn't matter. You still have people.
And every business has to have trust in order to get business.
Exactly.
Right.
Because you have a sales team, you have a marketing team, you have a business development team, you have people working on accounts. And it's not just about, I think one of the important things is it's not just about, and we talk about this with our clients all the time, it's not just about landing a new client or a customer. It's about retaining,
right,
because the cost of losing a customer, of losing an employee also is really big.
Sure.
So you don't want to, it's important to, in employee branding, is how you treat your existing customers. That's important. Think about your response time. If someone emails you and you take 3 days to get back to them because maybe they're not as big a customer as the other one, or they left you, God forbid, a voicemail and you don't check your voicemail, right? Or they're waiting for something for you and you promised it to them on Wednesday and it's now Monday and I don't still have it. What's going on there? Or you reschedule meetings last minute. Those are all aspects of someone's personal brand.
Right.
And that could be someone that does not have to be at the executive level. So those are things that we talk about a lot with customers, with clients, when they're thinking about their customers. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a service firm. And we focus on the people part of any business.
And some of those things that you talked about can be really annoying, but it's almost as though in the world today, you're thought to be some kind of an unreasonable son of a gun if you comment or remark on those. But the reality is that we're all aware of them. And eventually, yeah, everyone gets a mulligan. But if you consistently change meetings at the last minute, if you consistently are late getting back to people, that creates an impression.
Right. And think about it as a leader. If you do that,
Right.
if you show up even late to meetings,
you give permission to your team to do the same.
Exactly, Ed. That's exactly right. And it's not okay,
Right.
because at some point you're going to lose business, and it could be just an opportunity. If you think about, oh well, that's the person who he always takes 3 days. Perfect example. Somebody I know, who I really like, who is a senior executive. I referred 2 opportunities to him a couple weeks ago. No, 3 weeks ago. Didn't hear back. He's involved. He's a leader of a company, and he's also very much involved in business development. I had to follow up with him to say, hey, want to make sure you saw these 2 things, because one of the introductions that I sent, the person already responded, and he said, yeah, really busy, we'll get on it. He never responded. Well, guess what? I'm never referring opportunities to him
Because you
again.
look silly.
I look silly. Exactly. I'm embarrassed.
Right.
And so you think about, obviously that's an extreme example, but you think about if that happens to lots of people, that's not a good look for your business.
Right. But
often you go after the shiny thing, right?
It seems like it's so prevalent, though, that if you just do the basic blocking and tackling, if you're polite, if you're responsive, if you're accountable, if you get things done when you say you're going to, I think that now, it used to be table stakes, but now it kind of helps differentiate a company.
It does. I always say what we do and what you were talking about is not rocket science. Right. It's really not. But I think it also falls on the company too. You can't just blame it on the individual, and each person. The company has to look, the leaders have to look and say, how are we coming across?
Sure.
If we want to grow our business, if we want to take sales to that to the revenue to that next level, how are we going to do that? Let's look at our people. There's something, an example that I always say from a company's perspective is, if you get 5 people from the company, it doesn't have to be the leadership team or board, could be, but if you get 5 people from your company sitting around the table, and I say, describe the company,
right,
and you get 5 different answers, right, that's not a good place to start, because that means everybody's sort of thinking about it from their own perspective. Now, it may be because they joined at different times, maybe there was an acquisition, maybe there was, total transformation, whatever it is, there may be a reason for that. But you need to think about that and say, what can we do? How can we do this? Right. And it's an easy fix on the company side.
If ownership, executive management is committed, has the mindset, and is willing to hold people accountable for it. But if it's a 2-week initiative, before the next thing comes along, then it doesn't work, of course.
Right. And our whole approach, because of that, is not, we don't come in and do some training and then leave. We stay, we follow up. We want to make sure you get traction. Otherwise, what's the point? Right? It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. And the whole idea is, we want growing companies to grow faster, to grow more. Mm-hmm. So we want their buy-in. If they have to have buy-in from the top, and we want to be their partner. We want to understand, hey, where's the company going? Where are you looking to go? And then we'll help you do that through the work that we do, through employee branding and executive branding.
All right. So I know you're active in the world of board directorship, and you're an independent director yourself. Did that come from the work you did with the executives that kind of bled upwards, or did they just happen in parallel?
So it's interesting. So, you hear, the percentage it changes, but it's anywhere from 80-90% of opportunities come from your network.
Right.
For me, it all came from that. Everything else came afterwards. It was being known, right? You want to be a known quantity. And it's so much either someone referring you, or most often I shouldn't say most often, very often, people get their first board opportunity and they weren't actually looking necessarily, but someone recommends them. So in the board world, I always say you have to tell people that you're interested in it, because how do you want to be known? It again goes back to your brand, right? The board world is, what is the specific value? Just like if you were looking for a job, it's the same thing. What is the value that you can bring to a board? Do you communicate that? And do people know that about you? They may know you as an amazing, for, maybe a VP of operations or, or a CISO or a CTO. They may think you're amazing at all of that. Or, so, you're a supply chain expert, but do they know how that can help from the board perspective? And that's where you have to tell that story. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things for any individual, especially from a board in the board space, is being able to tell your story in a way that's relevant towards the things that you're interested in.
Now, I know that you certainly walk your talk. I mean, we talk about personal branding. You were a panelist at the Private Company Governance Summit in May in Washington, D.C., kind of public speaking up there, telling that story, doing what you tell other executives they ought to be doing. Let's talk about board directors and LinkedIn. Should directors be active on LinkedIn on behalf of the organizations whose boards they sit on?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it's really important because otherwise, I can't tell you how often when we, in our work with individual board directors, well, they'll say, oh yeah, I'm on the board of this or that. And you say, really? Can't see that on your LinkedIn. How would that make me feel as a company? So, okay, take Point Road Group, for example. We don't have a board. Oh, maybe one day we will. I don't know that we'll get that big, but let's just say we did. If I had people on my company's board that didn't communicate that outward, that wouldn't make me feel very good. Why aren't they doing that? But it also doesn't reflect back well because, often you look for people who are experts, right? And some boards also look for, there's that they want people who are involved in certain kinds of companies or certain brands, but you look for people who are experts. So when you look at a board of a company and you say, okay, let's say it's these 5 people, and then you can look them up on LinkedIn and say, oh yeah, they really are. But if otherwise it's just a name. But I absolutely think, it's different. Do they need to be active? There's a difference between profile and activity.
Mm-hmm.
I think we find that a lot of people at the executive level, there's that pushback for being active, right? The posting, the engagement piece. I don't want to say that's pushing it, but that's a different level. That depends on the individual, but absolutely in terms of their profile, they need to be. Same thing with their personal, their bio, right? Or a corporate bio or a board bio, whatever bio they have should talk about the boards that they're on. Absolutely. And, and frankly, it can come up in conversation too, depending though on the situation. Sometimes, let's say we meet at an event, actually, the way we did, I may not just automatically blurt out the boards that I'm on. It depends on, but that actually brings me to one thing that I want to mention that, and I touched on it before, that how you introduce yourself is so important. And you want to have kind of those key things that you want to touch on no matter what. And then those kind of optional things that you can say, depending on who you're meeting.
Right.
If you're in the board setting, maybe it's, if it's somebody you don't know, but what is it about yourself? Very often people get stuck in that, hi, I'm so-and-so, from so-and-so that, I'm chief operating officer of XYZ company. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I oversee manufacturing. And I've been there, I've spent the last 20 years in something company doing, overseeing manufacturing. That's not a personal introduction. That doesn't, you sell yourself short, and you also sell the company short, in my opinion.
It's funny you mentioned that about the profiles of board members. I compared the board for a very prominent veteran-related nonprofit last week. I compared the board members from their website versus all of their LinkedIn profiles. And I think probably only about 40% of them had the organization even on their LinkedIn profile.
Not surprising. In nonprofits, it's even worse than public or private companies.
But if you think, a lot of nonprofits, good ones, certainly the board plays a very important governance role. In all nonprofits, there's some sort of a fundraising role associated with that board activity. And what a simple way to get that word out there. It's just astounding that people wouldn't do it.
Right. And then to me, what I love especially about including nonprofit boards on LinkedIn is when you're looking at someone's profile, you can see that sort of goes to that next level when we were talking about earlier, that person, like, what are they interested in? And maybe I may not have, maybe I know someone who's on that board, or maybe I've donated or attended an event, or maybe I'm interested in that cause and I want to learn more. And I think it's great. And maybe, that means our conversation can start sort of at that next level. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important for people to do that.
And what do you think the boards fail to understand about LinkedIn? And because their role is governance, nose in, fingers out, On the other hand, they supervise the CEO. Should they be stipulating an expectation of the CEO that he or she and their team be active on LinkedIn, or is that too granular?
I think it's too granular. I don't know that they need to be active, but I think they should be representing themselves, because to me, that has to do with their brand, the company's brand. And again, for all those reasons we mentioned, I think they absolutely should, I think the leadership team at minimum. I also think at HR and sales and all the visible areas, they should have a decent presence. Activity is that's kind of a next level, because, you will find people, I know many who don't want to be, they're very uncomfortable with it. Okay, I understand. But you need to have a professional presence there. Even if it doesn't have to be super detailed, but you can have enough where someone can get a sense of who you are.
Well, let me ask you though, in today's world, if they say that they don't want to be active and you say, okay, but is it okay? I mean, I would almost say that we're getting to the point where it's not okay to not be active.
Well, I mean, it's their personal profile, so you can't force them.
I understand.
Right. But I think it's in their professional benefit. Absolutely. And that's where I think from a company perspective, a lot of people don't know if they've never been told that, or they don't understand what it is. So that's why, in the train, we do lots and lots of training when it comes to that. And whether it's on profiles or on content engagement. And when we do trainings, we sometimes have groups where there's experts and people who've never done it, or we break it up into different, and we make sure that it's easy so that it's not something that's scary. Because if they don't, I think there's a lot of fear of the unknown. And if you say, hey, here's what you can do, but that's also where the company can make it easy for them and say, hey, you can be a great brand ambassador here. We as a company, we post all the time. If you want to have some at least to get started, like a few company posts a week, that's something. I mean, that's not everything. That's not, I don't think that's not something you want to do for the longer term, but it's an easy way to get started. So we make it, very easy for people to understand that it's not this scary big thing that they have to reveal everything about their personal life, because they don't.
Yeah, you mentioned fear, and it's funny. I mean, is it pleasant to spend the time doing it? Is it pleasant to be authentic and share things sometimes? No, not necessarily. But there was an article recently, I think in the New York Times, about how particularly, I guess, Gen Z gets nervous answering the phone when somebody calls them. I mean, at some point, we have to just say part of what we need to do in life is grow and overcome those things that we're nervous about.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a deterioration of communication habits communication skills by every generation. It just keeps on, because that means talking. No one, that generation, they don't talk on the phone, they text. So that their verbal communication skills are not the same as the generation before them. And it keeps on going, so I think, that's something that I think I'm personally fearful of, sort of company leadership further down the line. Like, how are people going to be able to communicate? You can't do this. That's not how you make business decisions or manage risk or, think about growth. You can't do that all hiding behind a screen.
Sure.
Some people can. I think in certain businesses, you probably can, but in a lot of them, you can't.
I encounter a lot of what I would call projection, where executives who don't see social media as part of their workflow, maybe even think it's somehow inherently wasteful or unproductive. They just assume that everyone else who is sensible feels the same way. But research shows that many people, not only is there this visceral reaction that your research found, but many people actually use it for business research as well. And there's also significant generational differences. I mean, a boomer obviously looks at social media very differently and probably completely fails to grasp how a millennial or even particularly a Gen Z might look at it. What do you say to a senior executive who says, oh, come on, sensible, serious business people don't waste time on that?
Well, I mean, I can talk to them about a million different things, but first is, this is where everybody is. This is where everybody is. Look, why would you shoot yourself in the foot and lose opportunities for your business and for yourself by ignoring this? And then take them through all the different reasons, many that we discussed. You can't put your head in the sand. I think there's a shift from that, because I think about even just our business. And I think about on the individual side of our business, not our corporate business, our individual side of the business. And Our clients are definitely of more the boomer, Gen X. It's of a certain and where they stop fighting it because they know.
Right.
I mean, from a board perspective, people are looking at, that's where recruiters are all the
Right.
time. That's where even, if someone's, nom and gov committee or anybody, they're looking, who do I know? Who's in my network? They're not, there's no more Rolodexes anymore. And they're not going to go through their contacts on their phone or on their email and just scroll through that way. I mean, they might also, but it's a real missed opportunity, especially for a business at this point. Because as a business too, you may say, oh, it's not important to me, so I don't want to do that. But who's on your team? Likely most people are younger than you, right? At that point, if you're of that mindset. But even if they're not, even if they're even if it's everybody, they're your colleagues or of a similar generation, they understand the importance, or at least some of them do. And you're going to hurt opportunities for your business if you ignore it. You just are, because like you said, it's a really great research tool. On all the platforms. You see, you can learn a lot about a company, a business, and their team.
Right. There's also what I would call a lot of silent users, particularly in the industrial space. They may not be active posters. They may not even have a particularly robust profile, and it may be very sparse, but they may be on LinkedIn routinely looking at things, scrolling, picking a hashtag, researching a company, looking at somebody before they meet with them. And sometimes I think we conflate the fact that just because they're not visibly active doesn't mean that they're not active.
That's right. We had it's interesting. We had an industrial business reach out to us and said, our team is abysmal on LinkedIn, and we can't be, because when we go into a meeting with a prospect, there's usually like 10 of us from, representing different areas. And we see, everybody can see that they're looking at them. And I think they finally realized they were kind of slow to the table. This was a recent conversation, but absolutely, there's a lot of that. But I think not just in the industrial space, I think it's in a lot of industries too, where there's people, I don't want to put myself out there, but I'm using it all the time.
Right.
It's interesting. It's one of the guiltiest parties for that? People in search and recruiting. If you look at the profiles of people in executive search and board search and recruiters, they generally, not everyone, but a lot of them have really weak LinkedIn presence. But they're on it literally, that's where they are.
Is that because they make a conscious decision that they don't want to get found and pestered by people that are looking for recruiters?
They're already found. They're there.
Right.
They just don't want to spend the time. Oh, I don't need to. But really, at the end of the day, it's, it's not always the individuals aren't making decision to work with you. It's the companies. Right. So, and then I think of it, well, it still ties back to the company brand. And it's competitive out there, especially in the search space. And if I had a team of recruiters where their profiles haven't been touched since they started working here however many years ago, and then there's another team of recruiters in maybe a different vertical in the business where they all look sharp and great, even if they're not posting. That's part of it. And that goes back to our research, that it's not even we did not even touch content engagement in our research. We've thought about doing another, a follow-up on that, but we didn't even touch that. So that's a whole nother level.
But let's talk about talent acquisition. You're using this example of recruiters and some of the consistent behaviors that you see them having on their LinkedIn profile. But we talked earlier about the CEO, the president, the executive team, and their presence on LinkedIn and their activity will have, in many cases, a direct impact on their company's ability to recruit and retain talent.
Sure.
Have you seen specific cases that you can kind of give us a better example?
Well, we had a client, and it was a professional services firm, and they were growing, and they said people were, they weren't attracting. They were trying on LinkedIn to attract more talent, and they weren't. And they didn't, they suspected that it was their presence. And when we looked, we said their company presence was, really weak.
Right.
It really didn't speak to it. Kind of spoke to how they started. It mentioned zero about culture. Their posting was, once a month. It was somebody's assistant who who didn't know anything about posting. And the leadership had very weak presence. So why would they attract talent there? And what they were trying to do is they were trying to attract talent through their personal networks, because that's obviously you can save a lot of money that way. And it wasn't working. So we helped them. We revamped their LinkedIn strategy. We did profile training. We wrote profiles for executive team. And then things started to change. And now the company's, doing gangbusters. Were we the cause of that? No, we weren't the only cause, but helping them is really important. I think the other thing too is there's certain situations when you're looking to hire. Another is if you are looking to, let's say you're thinking about, I want to sell my the business, or maybe I want to acquire another company. Having your people look sharp is important, really important. And it can be a differentiator, throughout that process. Is it the only thing? No. But if someone's going in to evaluate, they're doing their due diligence, right? Who's the leadership team? Who's the board? Who are the senior level folks in, engineering or in production or in manufacturing? Who are those people? And if you can't get a sense, that it's not that they'll necessarily move on, but I think it could have a positive influence the other way.
Yeah, even if it's just a bias that forms, that's not a conscious part of the decision-making process. Nevertheless, it lurks there in the back of their mind.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, if you are, if you're private equity owned, right? And you're, there's that, what's that year of exit? And you're trying to get, it's all about value creation. And what are well, if helping your people look and sound better in everything, not just LinkedIn, right? But if you help with employee branding, then that may help you maybe retain a few extra clients, land a few extra clients, whatever it is, add more folks because you have a certain headcount that you're looking to reach. It can help with those things. And the relative investment at the end of the day is not that hard.
Right. Yeah, it's mostly time.
Yeah, it's all about time.
Now, what about different kinds of content? I'm thinking about a CEO who has to appeal to investors, to employees, to noteworthy prospects and customers, to the community. I mean, they've got a lot of constituency. Should they be posting different kinds of content in different ways for those different purposes?
I think, okay, so let's say that they are an active person. Let's just, say, yes, definitely. Doesn't have to be every single one all the time, but what are the most important things that you want to be visible for, right? You want people to see. And also, though, it's not just about, because remember, it's a social media. So it's not just about, hey, I've got some great things to share and talk about, but it's what are things that people are going to engage with? Because it's all about engagement. Because if I sat here every day and let's say I was, that person that you described, and I posted every day and I was getting like such little engagement, it's not really going to, it's a lot. It's going to be time. Even if someone's helping me do it, it's still time. And, I'm not a fan of, there's people who have people post for them all the time. There's lots of businesses. I mean, millions and millions of dollars in business. That's not my thing. I'm all about personal. It's fine if someone advises you on it, but I still think you should be doing it yourself. That's a whole nother thing. But it's about, what's going to get people to engage. Because if people don't like it or comment or see it, then all of that time that you're spending to reach these different constituencies that you're talking about, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be, kind of fall on deaf ears. So
on the other hand, in the B2B world, and I'm thinking particularly industrials, you don't need something to go viral. You don't need 1 million people to like it or start imitating.
No, it's not to be viral, but you want people who you're looking to reach to.
If you have 500 or 1,000 engagements with a post, particularly if you've got some hashtags in there that help others discover it when they're looking for something, feels to me like in aggregate over time, that can be very productive.
Well, but are people liking it or commenting on it or resharing it? Because if it's just about views, that's one of those things that's constantly changing. What do they count as a view? Is it someone, if I scroll past it and I don't even read it, that can be counted as a view. So, you don't just want to count as views. You want people to see it and acknowledge it and engage with it, because it's also about increasing your reach too and your visibility. So there's that building that credibility and trust, right? But then there's also that visibility and reach, because otherwise why are you on social media to start with? If it's just about sharing some specific viewpoint that you have, maybe writing an article that's going to be in a, an association or professional journal, that might do the trick too, if it's just about kind of one thing. Or you might do that and also post on social media. And if you're the type of person who is, is open to speaking, then maybe speaking at a conference. But taking a multi-pronged approach is the best way, especially for leaders, to really increase that visibility, not just focusing on
And so
one
as
thing.
part of the program that you take them through how to also grow their network, how to aggressively and proactively reach out and expand their network?
I would say not aggressively, because that, it's strategically, definitely strategic, because that's really important. Because you can add like 1,000, let's say on any social platform, you can add 1,000 connections, or you can go to an event and collect a ton of business cards. But are they quality? Are those the people? So it's always about strategically thinking about who are you trying to reach, and making sure it's about quality versus quantity.
So we've been talking a lot about LinkedIn. You mentioned Instagram and X earlier. We haven't talked about Facebook, and we haven't talked about this lightning rod that's TikTok. Should an executive ever be on one of those other platforms for their professional work?
Well, I think Facebook to me is the same as X and Instagram in that is that where the people you want to reach are? Are they there for personal or professional? Again, though, it depends on your business, because if you are in, let's say, consumer products or things like that, it depends. And does it make sense for you to be there? And what is your voice there? And are you consistent there? That, I think it really depends. But I just lost what was the last thing you said was
Well, I was trying to provoke you by asking about TikTok. See what kind of fireworks we might be able to come up with.
I don't think it's, for lots of reasons. To me, that's all. If you're an executive and like you're doing that personally, maybe you're doing some dance with your kids or things like that. But for business, however, again, if it's a consumer business though, TikTok is where it's at. So, in getting that reach and getting that viral reach quickly, and that.
But what about the recruiting part? I mean, if you're trying to attract millennials and Gen Z to work for your company, then should you be there conveying something about the culture?
Are you really going to convey culture through TikTok? I'm not really sure. I think you can do that through other platforms. I don't think you need to do that on TikTok.
Okay.
Again, that's my personal opinion. I'm sure other people will disagree.
Yeah, I know Gary Vee in his recent book, what is it? Day trading attention or something like that. I mean, he speaks at length about TikTok. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily worth doing, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment, because I was just strongly opposed to it, thinking it was completely irrelevant for B2B. And I think he makes a compelling reason to think about it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So what kinds of executives and companies does your firm work with?
So we work with, we're agnostic across all areas. So, from executives, every industry and functional area. There's certain areas where we have more expertise, but just based on, the years in depth and our connections, but we work across all functional areas and companies as well. It's really any company where they're focused on people, where they know people are important. And it's not just about driving the growth of the company, but also thinking about their culture, employee retention, right? And engagement and retention, because the work that we do, of course, helps the company, but it helps people too. And when companies see, one thing that I didn't mention, it's funny. It's like when you go on tangents, a big part of our business, we do executive coaching. And so whether it's executive coaching, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's communications, whether it's all of those areas together, when an individual sees my company is investing in me in some way, and it may be just me, it may be just 5 of us, it may be all 500 of us, that makes me feel really good, because they're spending money to help me be better at what I do. And it's not because I'm doing something wrong. It's never that. And no one ever thinks about it that way. It's, wow, they're investing in me. So that makes me more engaged. I now have a little bit more of a positive association with my company. Even if I already liked it, I have even more of a positive association. I might tell somebody that, in passing, hey, my company's doing this, right? So that makes me a better brand ambassador as well. So it's a really nice cycle that you're doing it for the company, you're doing it for the people, but it also enriches that stickiness of and that engagement and retention of employees too.
So a good ROI on the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my sense is that you probably have had a number of engagements where a company says, we got to do this. This makes sense. It's important. We're all into it. They engage you, you show up, and they just don't do their part. They just can't commit in the end. Do you have any stipulations going in to make sure that it will be mutually productive?
We don't. I think we're more stringent now when we are evaluating. That was one thing, when you talk about being an entrepreneur and mistakes you make and things like that. When you're earlier stage in a company, you want all the business. Oh, they
Right.
want to work with us. And you don't think about, are they really the right client for us? Does it make sense for us to work with us? Are they really going to be engaged? Because if they're not, then it ends up being, frustrating for us.
Right.
And they've spent the money. Then I personally, I don't feel good about it. Oh, great. So they've paid us all this money and we've given them, we've done all the things. And now they're not, like you said, doing their part, especially because we measure.
Right.
We check in and we see how things are going. So we are a little more stringent. We have said no to clients who are interested. You don't have to take everybody who comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
We find that very often it's companies who come to us that don't really fit that kind of profile of who we want to work with. Those are the ones who aren't as engaged.
So for those who think they may want to work with you, who hope they fit your profile of your ideal client profile, interested in talking to you, how do they find you, connect, learn more about Point Road Group, or if they're wondering about Alyssa as a potential board member, how do they contact you?
Well, they can, LinkedIn, of course.
Okay.
But they can certainly, you can share my email address. That's fine. They could also look on our website, pointroadgroup.com. And there's information about all of our services as well. But we also have a newsletter that we put out once a month. That's all we do with it. And we share articles relating to executive and employee branding. And the executive branding includes board branding as well.
And that great white paper, I'd recommend to people. In fact, I'll drop a link to the landing page in the show notes so they can download that white paper if they're interested.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Now, where do you go to learn more? Podcasts, YouTube channels, books, newsletters. What do you find to be good resources?
Yes to all of the above.
Okay.
I would say, I actually do learn a lot from LinkedIn. I read a lot of articles from there where I definitely, something's interesting. I click through, and then I always tend to be that rabbit hole person. I click through one article and then I'm learning on, I might have been taken to a company or, a publication site, and then I'm reading all these other articles. So definitely LinkedIn, definitely newsletters, other social, not so much. I would say those are probably the most common areas. And then, Googling things if it's something that I'm interested in, and then kind of looking. And, one thing we didn't mention, but that's the whole, using, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or things like that, that's now becoming a source too, where if you're interested or in wanting to learn more about a topic, we do a lot of that. Obviously, it's, you have to double check everything, but
sure.
I'm really blessed in that our team, where everybody's intellectually curious, and we share a lot that way. So I would say that's probably up there with LinkedIn in terms of where I learn things. We share articles all the time, or, and information all the time with each other.
And what have you found works well for that internal knowledge management and sharing? Do you use Slack, or what tool do you use?
We use Teams.
Teams. Got it.
And it's great. We also communicate by, email sometimes, when for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
We text occasionally, but really everything is through Teams, because then you always have the history of the links there, which I find great. And we use Teams internally and Zoom externally when it comes to video. But I think Teams is a good tool.
Understand. You seem to succeed at everything you set your mind to. What's something that you've worked really hard at, but you haven't really achieved the same proficiency that you're accustomed to achieving in other areas?
That is a good question. I would say, honestly, speaking about our employee branding, not our employee branding, about the expertise that we have in employee branding and sort of sharing that with others. I think that I haven't quite kind of hit that stride yet that I would like to, because as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about what we do. And I just would love to share that with more companies. We're doing a little bit more. I'm doing a little bit more of that this fall, and looking forward to doing. I haven't quite hit that stride yet.
Do you post regularly on YouTube?
YouTube, no. However, that is our sort of marketing in terms of our marketing plan and strategy for coming. We are going to do a lot more video. We've done very little. I think video is great. I watch videos all the time. I think it's been a time thing. I'm happy to do videos. I'm happy for anybody on our team to do videos. We haven't done it. And so we plan to. So watch for YouTube more. I think if you look at our YouTube channel, it's kind of abysmal.
Well, I'll drop a link to that as well so people can subscribe, build your subscriber to this journey as you do more.
We haven't updated much, but yes, we do plan on doing that a lot more, I would say. So I would say speaking on employee branding and video is definitely something I want to do more of.
So I've got this theory that text content is of diminished value, that when people have a problem and they go to look for a specific solution, they'll read text. But otherwise, they don't interrupt everything else they're doing. Increasingly, they want content that they can consume passively as entertainment and for edification, but passively. And so I think scrolling on social media does some of that, particularly on LinkedIn, because you'll get some professional ideas. But also, I think content, video and podcasts is content that people can consume while they're commuting or exercising or doing dishes or doing laundry or whatever the case may be. And it feels to me.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think podcasts are really terrific. And I think there's some people who are really into them, but it's more on the personal side. And I don't think people realize how many amazing podcasts like this one. But seriously, there are out there that are professional where you can do all those things. Like you could be doing walking, doing something, walking your dog, making dinner, doing sort of all that stuff that you can still learn a lot.
So I think that you're going to see some interesting results from your increased activity on YouTube. I'll have to reconnect with you in a year and see what you found.
I'll let you know once I will let you know once we start doing more
videos.
I
think going back to this trust question, it's also hugely powerful for trust, because the same message conveyed in writing, or you see the person's face, you hear their voice, that fosters more trust than just an authoritative article.
Yeah. Which is why when you came back to networking and all that, I do a fair amount of speaking, and I like that because people get to see a sample of kind of your expertise, and like you said, it builds trust versus if I were just to write up a summary of what I'm talking about, kind of maybe some people pay attention, but if you hear and we make eye contact or it's very different.
Cool. All right. Really powerful insights. Thank you, Alyssa. I really appreciate it. Wrap it up for us now. Speak directly to every industrial manufacturer who's listening who has never had LinkedIn in their career before, maybe has a profile, wondering whether they ought to go through that uncomfortable process of establishing and improving their brand and the executive presence and being more active. How would you put a bow around this last hour of conversation to convince them they should?
You got to do it. I mean, you'll miss basically, you will be missing opportunities, and you will attract a lot more customers. You will retain customers at the end of the day, have better relationships with kind of referral partners. We didn't talk about that, but people who can refer you business, and it's not just LinkedIn, it's everything relating to your brand. It's worth spending the time. It's not a big investment. And I think it's not as big as you think, really, that when it comes to your personal brand and employee branding, it's not this big behemoth that should be set to the side and kind of the bottom of the list, because at the end of the day, people do business with people, and it's about building trust. And if you can help yourself and your team with, incrementally by investing a little bit of time, then, and obviously resource too, but investing a little bit of time, it's worth it in the end.
There you have it. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your research and your insights.
Thanks, Ed. It was great talking to you. Enjoyed the conversation.
Great. For everyone listening, if you're an individual contributor who wants more out of your colleagues, wants to see your team more active, share this episode with your leaders. If you're a leader, share it among your colleagues, with your board, with senior leadership, whatever the case may be. And of course, you know the drill. Everyone, be sure, please, to share and like and comment and subscribe. Thanks very much for listening to the Industrial Growth Institute podcast.